Well, good evening, everybody. This is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and I'm here with another of our virtual events. And sorry for our fashionably late entrance here. We had a little miscommunication on the time, but here we are now, and it's great to have to see you again, Joe.
Too, Patrick.
Yeah.
Well, it's okay to see you.
So, well, it'd be better in person, wouldn't it?
It's true. Yeah, it is
And
true.
Barbara
I
could
miss
take
you
us
guys.
out for
I
an
miss going
expensive
there.
meal, and
I
yeah.
do.
But we're here on the publication. Today, the publication date itself, or maybe yesterday was the publication date, I think, of your brand new novel, Smoke. And we still have a very dwindling supply of signed copies left. But I got to say, Joe, it's funny. I've loved all of your books to date, but I think this might be my favorite. I mean, it's hard to say. I love this one and the first one are my two favorites. I think you've written a remarkable book here.
I would agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this one the most. I like this one the most.
Yeah. And it's tough because there's so much going on with this book. It's a real ensemble cast, and everybody's, it's a pretty heavy book too. For everybody who's read, I'm terrible about giving spoilers away, so I'll attempt not to do that tonight. But for those of you who haven't read the previous book, High Five, what can we say to kind of set up where Isaiah is at the beginning of this book?
At the end of High Five, Isaiah is chased out of town by a network of gangs. He betrayed one of the leaders, a guy named Monzo. Monzo put a 25,000 bounty on his head. So all these gangs are looking for him, but regular people hear about the bounty. So he's got, the mailman and the clerk at the grocery store and, the kids hanging on the corner looking for it. His poster is out there. So at the end of High Five, he leaves town. He is sick of being IQ and all of the violence, all the mayhem. He just wants to get out. Of course, he has to leave his Grace, his love of his life, and it's heartbreaking for the both of them. But she can't go with him because she's an artist. She has room and space to paint, and if she's with him, she's in danger. So that's the end of High Five. And Smoke picks it up. Just almost continuously. Isaiah's on the road. He is driving to nowhere in particular. He has PTSD. He is suffering from all the symptoms. It seemed to me he would have to have PTSD, given all the violence, death, mayhem he's seen and experienced. And he just doesn't want to be IQ anymore. He just wants to rest. And the last thing he wants is a case, and the last thing he wants is another bad guy. So he finally finds a little town called Coronado Springs in Northern California. Charming little place. It's just modern enough so you're in the 21st century, but it's also forest all the way around. So he finds a little place to stay, and he's comfortable. His symptoms are dying down, and he's feeling a little better. And he's thinking, well, I could stay here a while. I could relax. And then he comes home one day, and he's in this little guest house. And he gets to the front door, and he hears somebody breaking in. So he rushes inside, rushes in the kitchen. There's this 20-year-old kid, just kind of a flake, just kind of a hysterical, kind of nervous, antsy kid that's sort of all over the place. And he broke into Isaiah's house to find food. He just dropped the casserole on the floor. He slipped on the casserole, and that's where Isaiah finds him. And Isaiah questions him, and he finds out that this kid, I forgot his name. What is his name?
Billy.
Billy.
Sorensen.
Billy. Yes, thank you. Billy, he's escaped from the neuropsychiatric wing of the local hospital, and because he was acting and is paranoid. He's the kid that always cries woof and saw the aliens on the mountaintop and tells you the politicians are, going to kill him because he knows too much. He's that kid. So Isaiah gets to talking to him, and Billy says that he knows for sure that a vicious killer who has killed 17 people is coming to Coronado Springs. And Isaiah said, well, good for you. Good luck. And the kid just begs him, could I just stay a couple of days? Hospital's driving me crazy. Please, a couple of days. And Isaiah, who at his core is compassionate, says, all right, fine, just stay in the garage, stay the hell out of my way. But over the course of those couple of days, the kid's got police files, he got evidence, he's got documents, and he convinces Isaiah that this is true. This vicious killer is coming to Coronado Springs to kill someone in particular, but Billy doesn't know who. And it's not clear in any of the records. And so now Isaiah's task is to go, for one, stop this killer, and for two, find out who he's here to kill. And this is probably the most danger Isaiah has ever been in. And this is the closest he's ever come to death, like by his fingernails, to death. And I think it's the story tests him the most, both in terms of his detective skills and his physicality, and his emotional well-being. And I think I try to push him to his absolute breaking point. And I do.
Well, it's funny because it seemed like Isaiah and this young kid Billy are in some ways kindred spirits. There is an aspect of that because the kid is, he's not a dumb kid. He's a very, very intelligent, sharp kid, and he's a good hacker, and he's able to hack in and get all these police files. And there's a great scene where you kind of introduce Billy when he's still in the hospital with these two kind of like Beavis and Butthead sort of guys that are stuck in there with him. And some of those scenes are just magic. You talk about, but it's funny, when I say Beavis and Butthead, I'm not, they're obviously, I'm not making fun of them. It's just they're young men of that era, of that age. Yeah, you do too. What I was trying to say is you're not making fun of mental illness. In fact, mental illness plays a big role in this book. Yeah, and in particular, I wanted to kind of circle back on Isaiah's PTSD that he's experiencing. How did you? I know that you're always working to make sure everything, dot all the I's and cross the T's and everything. What was some of your research like into that arena?
I knew two guys who are readers, in fact, Facebook friends. And I contacted them and I asked them if they'd talk about their experiences, and they did. I also read a lot and watched videos on YouTube. And I was trying to get a feel for what it's like to have PTSD, and to try and tell it from the standpoint of Isaiah's point of view, that he's experiencing it. Other people are not watching him have PTSD. He feels it coming, and he feels the symptoms, and he knows he's succumbing. And the PTSD takes him to the bottom. It takes him to the absolute bottom, where he doesn't want to live anymore, which is pretty extreme for this level-headed, very intelligent guy. But that's the kind of research I did.
Right. And then meanwhile, Isaiah has left Los Angeles, left Long Beach, and Juanel has found himself into, he's got some problems too.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about what's going on with Juanel.
Well, for those of you who haven't met him, he is an ex-hustler. He is slick, he is opportunistic, very self-involved, and yes, he's a hustler and has made his living like that for a long time until he married Charisse. Charisse is a straight up, no nonsense woman and doesn't take any guff from him. Now, Dotson has been chronically unemployed, and Charisse is finally fed up. She says, Dotson, Bonnell, I got you an internship at a big advertising company. And he resists like hell, mostly on the basis of, I'm a hustler from the hood, and there I'm gonna be among all these white people. I'll be like Lil Wayne at Sean Hannity's birthday party. I will not fit in. And they have this back and forth about, the cultural differences are not that great. And he says, yes, they are, and kind of lays out his resume, just a little disturbing. And he says, well, somebody's gonna have to teach me how to behave in that world. And of course he knows he's got this all planned already. Now it can't be you, you're busy. Can't be Grace, she has an art show. Maybe that hooker that came to our wedding, she's white. And he goes through a list of people. And of course, none of them are suitable. And Dotson thinks he's won the argument. But Charisse thinks, what about my mother? She was 25 years as a vice principal of Carver Middle School.
His nemesis, his long-standing nemesis.
Standing nemesis. Every time she sees him, she says, "Oh, it's you." And they don't like each other. She's very stern and formidable. And she doesn't want to do this, but she's going to do it for her daughter, Charisse. Dotson doesn't want to do it at all. And she gives poor Dotson a makeover. She makes him get a haircut like Will Smith. She puts him in a business suit and Oxford shoes, and they work on a speech. One of the exercises.
It's like a South Central Pygmalion.
Exactly. To work on a speech, he has to binge watch Friends. Say everything they say the way they say it. And she goes through a whole list of these little lessons about what music to listen to and what to talk about and how to eat. And all of everything he does is wrong, from picking up his fork to how he drives to everything. She just absolutely takes him apart and tries to put him back together again. And so that is Dotson's story. And then he's not actually ready for anything, but he has to go do this internship. And it's a big company. And it turns out to be very different than what he anticipated. And it turns out Gloria, I didn't actually know what she was talking about. So Dotson's, the man he's working for, is a middle-aged guy who wants, not a middle-aged guy, he's working on senior citizen. He wants to retire. He's totally burned out. All he's waiting for is retirement. He's got one more year to go, but his boss wants to fire him. So he's hanging in there, even though he's completely burned out. So along comes Dotson, sees this guy, and thinks, well, if he gets fired, I don't have an internship. And, Charisse will be pissed, and she'll come up with something even worse. So Dotson tries to help this guy. He's like a suburban white guy, and he's just completely out of touch with everything hip. And so he says when they started rapping on Diet Pepsi commercials, he knew it was over for him. So Dotson, he takes this man's assignments he's getting from his director, who really doesn't like him and wants to fire him. Dotson has to come up with his own commercials. And it's sort of a Cyrano de Bergerac thing. And Dodson is
Right.
using all of his street knowledge and all of his own perceptions about life in the hood and the people in the hood, and he's applying to them to these commercials. And I'm not going to tell you what the commercials are or the reaction, but they're all Dodson.
Yeah, it's funny. Those scenes, where he's enduring that makeover, those must have been just a hell of a lot of fun to write. They sure are fun to read.
I had too much material. I
Really.
could have, yeah. I mean, there's
And
so
there's
many.
this wonderful, wonderful critique about the banality of, middle of the road society and culture that you managed to sneak in.
I do it when I can. It's sort of a nexus of character and story, and I sort of see, you know what, the character could talk about this. So I sort of look for those things, and with Dodson, there are plenty. Dodson
Yeah.
has, yeah.
No, I was just going to say it's interesting because this book really is an ensemble cast. It's it is a Isaiah is only really part of the book.
Yes.
He's removed, but then there's that connection and these different threads kind of moving towards each other.
Mhm.
And at first I'm like, how the hell is Joe going to pull this off?
That's what I thought.
And, all these different, but they're all so interesting. And, as your regular readers know, some of these characters they're not, ancillary side characters. They're main players in this story.
Yeah.
I think about Deronda. She's in the space of 5 books undergone this tremendous transformation.
Yep.
And she's a successful entrepreneur, owns these food trucks. Grace is working for her. But she's got some shit that she has to deal with too in this book.
She does.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but
Well, she describes herself in her younger days as Miss Ho of the universe. And when she was in that phase, she had sex with a guy in the bathroom at an underground club in Compton. And turns out she got pregnant. And, she was really like into street culture then. And she thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to her. What was she going to do with a baby? What's going to happen to all her baby daddies if she has a baby? And the baby comes, and it turns out it's the best thing that ever happened to her. She loves this little boy, Janelle, and he's her motivation for getting up in the morning. He's the reason she works so hard. She wants to give him a future and something a lot better than what she had. So everything is fine. And she gets a call one day from a guy named Bobby. Carolyn, his name is Bob. Don't laugh at me, Patrick.
I can't remember his name either. I just read it.
Anyway, Bobby is just sort of he's kind of a sleaze. He works at Wells Fargo as an assistant manager, and he's just bored as shit. And he wants to get ahead, but he doesn't care how. And he sees an article in the LA Times magazine about Deronda, and she has this beautiful little boy, and he thinks he finds a way to take her business away. And of course, Deronda has something to say about that. And it is a battle of wits between the two of them. And eventually Dodson and Grace get involved. And, I'm bringing together the kind of members of this community. And they deal with this guy. And hopefully in a fun way.
Yeah, we can't really say too much more, but there is, this sort of, sleazebag con artist opportunist. He has I hesitate to even call her a lady friend, Sandra, who's an addict. And some of the scenes at this sort of ghetto apartment complex, the Dolphin, Deronda is forced to do her own kind of investigation to see what's going on. And
Yeah.
Some of the scenes with Deronda and this, street really broken woman, addiction has taken her way down. I think are some of the most magical scenes in the book. I love how you do that too, because you'll have these scenes that are, really funny, but then there's these real tender, poignant nuggets that are stuck in there. And it's just part of your, no real question, just a compliment there. I really like how you do that.
When I'm writing, I'm always looking for the emotion. I'm asking myself, what's the emotion in this scene? Because I think that's what readers respond to. Not so much the action itself, but the emotion it generates in them from the interplay of the characters. So I'm looking all the time to write that, even no matter what it is, whether it's humor or drama or action. I'm looking for a way to bring those feelings forward, because those are the things that people recognize.
Mm-hmm.
They may not be the same specifics, but people recognize those moments, those feelings. And I look for them. Well, I mean, really, it's the way I write now. To find those things, to find them, and it's always fun. It's always gratifying to find them.
Right. Now throw into this, as if this mix wasn't already complicated enough, you've got your God, what is his name? That the hitman character who's Skip.
Yeah.
Skip, who's just which isn't really his name either, right?
Skip Hansen, that's a name he made up.
Right.
Real name is Magnus Vestergaard.
Right.
And in school they call him Maggot. And he wanted a normal name, so when he became an adult, he picked Skip Hansen. It seemed a friendly name, a cheerful name, even though he's a hitman. And Skip, in the, I think it's the first book, IQ, he was the hitman that tried to kill Isaiah's client, and Isaiah eventually caught him and put him in prison, and really destroyed his whole life. He had this little world that he was into, and Isaiah destroyed it, not without reason. But Skip's been in prison, and he is a very strange, borderline psychotic guy. And I try to write him as you're kind of sympathetic with him, but he's also extremely dangerous. And he gets out of prison, and he can't find Isaiah anywhere. And then he finds out Isaiah has had a girlfriend, and she's here in East Long Beach. Maybe I can get to Isaiah through Grace. And that's what he tries to do.
Right.
To threaten her in a way that she'll have to go to Isaiah. And so Isaiah will have to come to town.
Yeah.
And that's his strategy.
Right. Just for the people that are watching on Facebook, I'm trying to pay attention here. I'm obviously at home tonight doing this from home, which is kind of nice. But if you have questions for Joe, go ahead and write them in the comments field, because I am keeping my eye on that. But I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about, I mean, the AMSAC, the serial killer that you come up with in the book. Was there a little elements of Golden State and some other classic California sort of serial killers thrown in there, or was that not really an inspiration? Or the BTK, or?
Certainly, I would call it inspiration. I knew I wanted a killer, and
Yeah.
I wanted to take just little tidbits, like calling him AMSAC, like BTS. It just take those little things just to make him familiar enough, and to have those little kinds of tags that people can glom onto, so he's not completely alien. But I tried to write him from the inside out, like I do most of the characters. I try to see the world through his warped eyes. And it's an Elmore Leonard thing. He would have a scene and he would write it from the point of view of the character he thought was most interesting, would have the most interesting thing to say, to perceive. And it did a couple of things. I mean, it moved the story forward, but it also revealed character. You know, this guy's talking and his views and his point of view and his actions. And so it was very clever of him, you know, to do it from the most interesting character's point of view, because he did two things at the same time. He moved the story forward and he's revealing this character. And that's what I try to do. I mean, I shoplifted that from him for sure. And William Crow, even with Crow, and I try and find something human in them. Try and find something relatable, something that we can recognize, even though it's warped and distorted. That's the other thing that I consciously try and do. In the darkest characters, I'm still looking for something that the reader can feel. And you know, it's like when the good guy and bad guy are colliding, it's much more interesting if you're invested in the bad guy too. Then the conflict becomes emotional on both sides. I mean, you may not agree with the bad guy's position, but you understand why he's so hell-bent.
Right.
You know? And I mean, who really cares about a car chase unless you're invested in the people in the car? So I try to give everybody a point of view, an understandable point of view, so that when they go in conflict, we understand the stakes for everybody, the emotional, psychological stakes, as well as, you know, kill the bad guy, rob the bank. And that's what I try to do with Crow. Oh, I also, you'll notice in all of the books, they're never attractive, they're never appealing, they're never cool. They're never, you know, lives in a penthouse and drives a Maserati and gets secret codes. Criminals, there's a reason criminals are criminals. If they could have gone legit, they would have. In large part, they're dumb guys. Yeah. They're dumb, directionless, no aspirations, and no thought of anyone else but themselves. There are reasons for that, of course, but you know, if you're a victim, you don't care. You know.
Well, there's the
you know, you
no, go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, or you're an elected official.
A very good example. Very good example. No, you know, you don't care if you're a victim, but I'm trying to make those kinds of characters recognizable to the readers. I mean, yeah. you may have a brother or a sister who is some watered down version of this guy.
Absolutely,
because you'll see the terrible qualities that you see in your own family.
I didn't say that. I have a sister. I said that too quickly, and I didn't mean my own sister. She's not like that. No, but I take your point because, you know, all too often certainly in Hollywood, largely, and in a lot of thriller novels, there are black and white characters, you know, instead of, you know, degrees of gray, shades of gray. And you're right. I mean, it's good to have a, you know, it's a tricky one, I imagine, when you're writing a villain kind of character or somebody who's it can be challenging to humanize that person, I suppose.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, obviously a lot of these characters in Crow is a very damaged individual. And so it's hard not to take into account his own abuse and background. And
I don't want to make him sympathetic, but I
Yeah.
want you to understand the reasons why he is the way he is, why he's brought this story to a brink, an extreme brink. There are reasons why anybody does crazy things like that.
Yeah.
And everybody who's listening has done something like that. Maybe not as extreme, but you've done something that if it had turned just a little bit, you'd be in prison.
I'm not going to admit to anything, but you're absolutely right. um, just kind of going back more generally, I know that when you first started the series, your original description, which was so good and so appropriate, was Sherlock Holmes in the hood. And I remember that was kind of a tagline, and
Yes.
it was really interesting. And still when I turn somebody onto your work, I always bring that up. Do you still feel that way as the series has progressed? I mean, obviously, Isaiah, he has this cerebral. He's the cerebral guy, and if anything, 1L would be his Watson in a way. There are those elements together. Isaiah is a very complex, emotionally character in the same way that we could read Holmes. I don't know. I just wanted some more further thoughts about, as you get into book 5 here, is it still Holmes? Is it still Sherlock Holmes in the hood, or is it morphed in your mind into something else?
He'll always come back to the hood and come back to his friends. And he has that background. But he's really a man who seeks justice for people who cannot seek it for themselves, wherever he finds them. So it may be in the hood, but it may be someplace else. It may be in Coronado Springs. And his driving forces are basically his compassion and his horror at the victims and their suffering. He feels for them, and it's one of the things I try and put in all the books is a lot of times victims in crime books, they're shot and then we never see them again.
Right.
And what I wanted to do is always pay attention to the victim. There are consequences to crimes. People suffer because of crimes. And violence changes you. It changes who you are. I mean, if you've ever been shot at or beat up or attacked, that stuff changes you. It changes the way you see the world. You are a different person after that. The world is, not really a friendly place anymore.
Right.
You are more watchful. You are more wary. You're more careful with people. And that's what I want to remind the reader of. That violence has consequences, and it does not go away. I mean, you may feel okay, and you may be yourself, but yourself is different as a result of that.
Sure.
As a result of that violence.
Yeah. All of a sudden, this illusion of safety that you had, slips away. There's it's funny. I was we were rereading Dashiell Hammett not too long ago. And there's this, I think it's in the Maltese Falcon. There's this wonderful little episode, kind of a side episode that he throws in. It's called the Flintcraft episode, if you're a real Hammett nerd or whatever. Anyway, it's about this guy who has, 2.5 children, the house in the suburbs, the office job. He's sort of the definition of the quote successful man. And one day he's walking down the street. It's in San Francisco, I believe, and they're working on a skyscraper or a big building, and this metal girder comes down and hits the ground right in front of him, and another 2 seconds and it would have just killed him instantly. And in that moment, he suddenly, it changes him forever, which is, kind of what you're talking about. And all of a sudden he in his case, his response is to take off, and completely reinvent himself. And it's a great thing. But anyway, it's kind of apropos of what you were saying. That's the same for victim of violent crime. You get shot, all of a sudden your world totally changes.
Totally changes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see the world differently.
Let me see. Let me just get to some of these questions. Yeah, Donna, she says, I've often heard how someone feels the onset of an episode, and I think she's talking about PTSD here, but rarely how that spiral down ends. Is there a trigger? Does one simply go to sleep and wake feeling a little bit better? Have you read anything about that? That kind of thing.
It's not so much, at least in terms of my own research, it's not so much episodes. I mean, you can have an anxiety attack or a panic attack, those kinds of things. But PTSD is a state of being. You see the world from a very frightened, distorted place. It's your reality. I mean, if you have PTSD, you're not experiencing it as symptoms. It's not like your nose is running or you're coughing. The world it's incredibly threatening, oppressive, pointless, futile place. And as well as things like incredible, horrible nightmares and days when you're inert, you cannot move, you're afraid to move. If you move, something will happen. And the something can trigger the fear, like an extraordinary fear, and you freak out. But you're walking around fearful. I mean, you're walking around depressed and angry and self-loathing. You're walking around like that. And something like an anxiety attack can explode, and you scream at your wife or throw things at your kids. But it's a steady state illness. Not, I mean, it's mental illness.
Yeah.
And you're walking around in that state, seeing the world in that way. So, and it doesn't end. I mean, it doesn't end unless you get treatment.
Yeah.
There is no end. You don't wake up in the morning feeling better. You don't. It's an illness, and it needs treatment. And Isaiah knows. Anybody who has PTSD knows that you can't cure yourself. You can't get through it alone. You need to seek help. But for Isaiah, there's no help in sight.
Yeah. I was watching an interview, related to PTSD with the guy who wrote that book Matterhorn, the Vietnam novel, real epic Vietnam novel, and he was a Marine, and he was talking a little bit about his own PTSD, and this kind of relates to what the question was. He said he would have these episodes, I guess you'd call them, but one time he was reaching up to put some cans in his cupboard in his kitchen, and he bumped his head, and it startled him. And before he knew it, he said he had ripped down the entire wall of cupboard, and his little kid's just sitting there going, "What the hell's wrong with Dad?" And it was that instant. And with sounds too, I think that those can be can catapult you into that.
The flashbacks, sometimes they come straight up, like you remember an incident and your building's falling on you and you freak out. But other times it comes indirectly, like your friend. He bumps his head and tears a cupboard out. You're not remembering anything specific, but somehow it's related to something that happened to you.
There's a noise and you have to react or else you'll get killed, kind of a thing. Yeah. I think that was the thing in his case.
Mm-hmm.
Going through the jungle, and if you don't respond to this noise, right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Let's see. Sorry, everybody. Does this, okay, yeah. Gibran, let's say his last name. Does this scene take place in Shop and Save in this book?
Which scene is this?
Shop and Save? Isn't that the market that you've used in some of the earlier books?
Yeah, that's the neighborhood market. That's the
Yeah.
neighborhood market. It's sort of like Ralph's or
Yeah,
Tom's or
I
something.
don't think so. Okay, yeah, here's more of a practical question, which is if you start in the middle of the series rather than at the beginning, will I miss any nuances?
Yes, you will.
Yes, you will. Can it be done? Yes. Yes. But
Well,
if at all possible, it is really good to go back and read them in order, I think.
you can start in the middle.
Yeah.
I tried to write them each as standalone, so you could just pick one you want. But the first novel has the origin story.
Yeah.
How Isaiah got to be Isaiah. It used to annoy me like hell, where you have these detective shows and the guy has all these skills and he just shows up like that. He just shows up and he has all these skills and you kind of go, well, where did he get them? How did that happen? And that frustration was a sort of a motivator behind putting Isaiah's backstory in the first book. So we know where he's coming from and we know why he became a PI and his motivation and his experiences that drove him into his profession.
Right. One of the things I've mentioned this to you before, but one of the things that I really like about the books, especially from the very beginning in the first book, there is this sort of, Isaiah, he's not particularly impressed by materialism, and material things. I mean, he's created a nice environment for himself, a nice, modest, but there's a critique of, the rampant materialism out there in society. I like that about the books.
It's my pet peeve, but it fits with Isaiah, which is why I used it.
Yeah.
I am sort of appalled at wretched excess. He bought his 16-year-old son a $360,000 Maybach. And think about that. $360,000 Maybach car for a 16-year-old kid who didn't have a license, so the chauffeur had to drive. I mean, what is that? What the hell is that? Tom Cruise has a $50 million house he built in Aspen. Why? Why did he do that? I mean, they have nice hotels in Aspen. You could build a pretty good house for 10 million. I don't understand this absolutely absurd, tragic, wretched excess. It's Kanye rented the AT&T Stadium for his wedding. What is that? He could have given 40 people permanent jobs for the rest of their life for the kind of money he spent. So yeah, it's just kind of a pet peeve.
Yeah. Let's see here. The classic question, Joe. How much of you is Isaiah?
Not much. He's what I aspired to be. He's the guy I wanted to be. Smartest guy in the room. Very cool, like he has this intensity, sort of like Steve McQueen. He's in the room, but even though he doesn't say anything, he has presence.
Yeah.
He's quick. And he always knows what to do. And he has all these skills. And this is totally the opposite of me. I know how to write, but other than that, I don't know how to do anything. And I'll witness this thing tonight where, I was going to wait another hour before I plug in. And so it's just, when I was a kid, I had to call my brother to set the time on my VCR. There is oh I said this in a newspaper article, but my three brothers, they made up a saying about me that goes, if your plane crashes in the jungle and you need to survive, Joe is the one that you should kill and eat. So that's me, give me a screwdriver now. So I'm definitely not Isaiah, but he is what I want it to be.
Gotcha. You have another question here is actually a couple of people.
Hmm.
Do you have any thoughts about other non-Isaiah kind of fiction?
Yeah. The Raymond Chandler estate asked me to write a contemporary Philip Marlowe. So I'm working on that now.
Wow.
Yeah, it'll be out next year, February.
Wow.
It's
Contemporary?
yeah.
Wow.
Think of him as sort of, Brad Pitt with an attitude. He retains some of the qualities of the original, some of the brashness, some of the I don't give a fuck what you think kind of attitude.
Yeah.
But he's in many ways different, and the cast of characters is very different. But it gave me a different palette, different colors. I mean, I write the same. My writing's the same, and it wasn't daunting in that sense. But I'm really happy with the book. Now I finished the first edit, and we're in the second edit now. But I'm really happy with the book. The question is, will Chandler's millions of fans around the world be disappointed and hate me? So
other people have tried it with mixed success. That's a really gutsy thing to do.
I didn't think it was that gutsy. I mean,
was it fun though?
Oh, it's great fun. It's not in the hood, and you have just a cast of different characters, a different milieu, different kinds of characters to explore, and it's a lot funnier book than IQ. It's a fun book. It's a romp. I mean, there's certainly a crime and there's certainly bad guys, but I didn't want to write this really dark story.
Yeah,
it's a Hollywood story, and there are showbiz people involved, and there's a great deal of satire, as you might imagine.
Perfect. Yeah.
Marlowe is cool. He's a cool guy. You think Brad Pitt, think George Clooney. He has that kind of style and charm and presence, and anyway, I really like him. I mean, he's smart, and he can really be intense, and he has the best banter of any character I've written. So the dialogue is really fun. And yeah, it's out in February 22.
One of the things, of course, that we love so much about Chandler is, how he could do so much with just one little descriptive thing.
Yeah.
Like mentioning a woman walking into a bar, and all of a sudden you had a picture of, the whole society that she's coming from. He was just a master at that.
Yes, it's one of the skills I talk about in a lecture I gave is to learn to do that, to learn to pick out the details that they're sort of like clues. And if you give the right clues, the reader can fill in the rest.
Mm.
And it's, you think about it. Think about the last time you had dinner with your family, or what relevant details would you use to describe your mom? You got to do it in 2 sentences, or your boss, or your house. There's a description in the opening of IQ, description of his house, where I use where I use relevant details to describe an entire neighborhood without describing an entire neighborhood. And certainly it's not exclusive to me. I mean, any writer you admire knows how to do this. But yeah, it's a skill. It's a skill. It's a learned skill. And one of those things, you just have to write, 500 shitty ones before you get it right.
Did you go back and, of course, reread all the Chandlers?
Yeah, I read. Yeah, I reread.
Luckily, there aren't that many of them.
No, but it's I try to get the attitude.
Yeah.
The attitude, the feel of the guy, the way he sees the world. So I went back to find that stuff, as well as details. I mean, I put the Contemporary Model's office on Hollywood Boulevard in Ivor, and that's where the original Bill Model had his office. Things like that.
Yeah, it's funny because LA is one of those towns that the ghosts of the past are never too far away. When you go to LA and you see the jacaranda trees and the ghosts are everywhere. I was talking with Walter Mosley a little bit about this a couple weeks or a month or so ago, and we were talking a lot about that. That there's also that strange occult underbelly in LA. There's just so much there. There's so much to write about, and right now
there's so much to make fun of.
Yeah, right. And it's right now it's in a period of so much change too, Los Angeles. What are you seeing out there generally in LA? What's going on there right now?
On the whole, I say there's a lot of fear and a lot of restlessness. There is the underclass pushing forward for progress, and a lot of people impatient, angry, and are just tired, and they want to throw the old guard out, and they want new ideas, and they want people who are actually going to serve their constituents. And you see a lot of other people running scared. I know a couple of people in Beverly Hills who I won't get into politics, but yeah, that's sort of the move. I mean, I think there are a lot of people in the top tier of socioeconomic situations who are afraid, and they're not afraid of physical harm. What they're trying to protect is class.
Mm-hmm.
Is I don't want anybody rising up to my level. Right. I like it up here. It's exclusive, and you masses can stay the masses. And so that's really their fear, and that really drives a lot of their views. They may come out as completely nonsensical. What they say doesn't make sense. So that's not what it's about. No, it's about, I want to preserve my position, and I don't want to equate myself with all of you, the unwashed.
Yeah. It is kind of interesting seeing that move, in terms of architecture and things like that. It's interesting seeing downtown, the slow renovation of parts of downtown anyway. That some of that's really welcome, as long as they preserve and don't rip all those great old buildings down.
They are tearing them down, or they're putting in $2 million condominiums, and basically trying to turn it into this conclave of upscale people, which they've done. But none of the surrounding areas got any love. Skid Row is still Skid Row. It's one of the worst places you could possibly imagine. It's 3 square miles. And all these years it's been there, they've never even been able to clean it up. Not even clean it up.
Do they want to?
Evidently not.
It seems like more of a containment strategy, as long as they can. Yeah.
Where are they going to go? Where are they going to go? No. But that they don't even clean it up. In a world of Kershaw's $36 million a year salary for throwing baseballs, and Jay Leno's $150 million car collection. That's LA, and yet 3 square miles. Sorry, we can't pick up the trash.
Yeah. Well, sorry, folks. I've been hogging all the questions here. Let me get back to it, and then we should probably take her in for a landing. Gibran asks a couple of questions. Who are some of your favorite contemporary mystery thriller writers, and what book are you reading right now?
Nobody especially unusual. I really like Joe Nesbo. I really like, who wrote Wonder Valley and These Women?
Oh God, she's brilliant. Ivy Pacoda.
Yeah, I'm going to do a thing with her in March.
She's terrific.
Yeah. She knocks me out. She writes great books. And Gabriel Talent, my absolute darling. One of the scariest books I've ever read. Like scary.
Yeah, I didn't read it.
But it's brilliant. Brilliant. The 2 main characters are just, you'll remember them. There are multiple scenes in there that'll just scare the shit out of you. And yet it's a literary novel. So that made a big impression on me. And that's all I can remember. I don't have books in my office. They're all in the garage in big laundry tubs.
Right. I'm sure you probably read Connolly and James Lee Burke and people like that.
Mosley and Attica Locke.
The greats. Let's see. Oh, yes. Is IQ, the TV show, going to happen?
Developments. So Alcon was a big company, a finance company, but they're producing now. They own the books. And they had, I thought, made a deal with HBO Max for a TV show. I got a showrunner, director. The package was coming on nicely, and then the negotiations fell out because of money. Alcon and HBO Max couldn't get it together, but both entities loved the project, so they're going to do 4 IQ movies, and it's easier to do because Alcon can finance the movies itself. So they already have the director, they already have showrunner, a guy to write the script and the books. So I'm very pleased with that. You don't have to have 10 producers and get a writer's room and all these other people. It's a much simpler process. It usually takes a long time, but Alcon has the financing, so they can do this on their own. They don't need the studio's blessing. So I'm excited about that. Yeah.
And will you have, Wendy just asked, will you have some creative input?
The producers really respect material. I was totally blown away. The showrunner, who's now writer-producer, Matt Carnahan, he came from House of Lies, among a million other things. He's the nicest person I ever met in show business. The nicest person I have ever met. He's like 6'3", huge, big beard. He looks like a biker, but the nicest man I ever met in show business. He loves the books, and so I'm pretty fortunate that way. Yeah,
that's got to be refreshing. Somebody who's genuine and who's really paying attention to your material. And
one of the last things that drove me out of screenwriting was I was talking to this executive, must be 23, 24 years old, and he thought Pretty Woman was a classic. And I said to myself, I can't do this.
Probably never heard of Robert Mitchum, I bet. Yeah.
Nope. Nope.
Um, well, I was going to ask more, but um, should I go into this? Yeah. What about your audio books? Are you pretty happy with the way they've been done so far?
Um, I have varying opinions about them. Sometimes I'm pleased and sometimes I'm not. And they vary throughout the book itself. And sometimes I'll be very pleased, got it right on. That's what I heard in my head. And other times I go, no, that isn't the book. No, stop. And I think it'll be like that for every author.
Is there continuity with some of the actors or no?
It's one narrator, and they had the same narrator for the first three books, and now they have a new guy named Zeno Robertson, and he's very good, very good. Again, I hear it differently in my head because it's so specific, and nobody's gonna, nobody can see inside my head or hear the sounds that I hear. But he's doing a good job. He's a talented kid.
Yeah. Kind of finally, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that not just myself, but everybody, I think, who reads your work, that you do so well is dialogue, and you have your ear is tuned to the street. How do you keep it tuned to the street? And how do you stay current, with the language of the streets?
I don't. The street vernacular is more about rhythm, word choices, and syntax. If you listen to Richard Pryor, he doesn't use any jargon, but he's clearly from the street. I use hardly any jargon, but I know the rhythm, I know the cadence, I know the inflection, and I know the word choices and all of that. That's what makes it credible. All the contemporary stuff that's on the street and that's in the hip hop world.
Of the moment, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I don't use it. I don't use it. It's the sound. Cadence.
Gotcha.
I mean, if you think about, a relative who has an accent, they may say all the same words that you would say, but they have a different flow. They have a different cadence.
Right.
Whether they're from Eastern Europe or Mexico or Switzerland.
Great answer. Yeah. Hadn't really thought about it exactly that way. That's really interesting. I mean, I'm sure occasionally some little nugget will make its way in,
Occasionally I find the right piece of jargon. The thing that I hate is back in the day. I'll just
that's so
jump off a
2015,
building.
Joe.
I'll jump off a building before I use that myself.
You know what the latest tick is, that I'm finding irritating is if you listen to NPR or just about anywhere, people say right a lot all of a sudden. And have you noticed that in conversation? They'll be talking and you know what I'm saying? Right. Right. It's become.
You need something to acknowledge the other person. That and absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that is kind of an empty word, isn't it?
Yes. I think an entire generation would be lost for words if you eliminated the word like.
Like
it's in like this, like that. Yeah, those things are annoying. I try and avoid cliches as much as possible.
Well, anyway, thanks so much for spending a nice solid hour with me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Anytime,
always good
Patrick.
to talk with you. And although we should touch upon Margaret Cho because it's a tradition.
Is it?
Cho?
Yeah, I love her.
Is she going to be making any encore appearances in future IQ books?
Oh, well, I don't know. No, I don't think so because she was the favorite of a 10-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And she was the role model for him because she was so forward and aggressive and spoke her mind.
For those of you who are wondering what the hell we're talking about, if you haven't read IQ, the comedian Margaret Cho has a very small, symbolic, but very significant role in that book.
Watch one video of her and you'll get the whole thing.
Yeah. All right, everybody. So again, I always forget the commercial product placement. Here's the book. I really like the black too, going back to the style of the first book. It's really classy.
The guy's name is Capo Ing, and he did a hell of a job. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, still have some signed ones. If you go to our website, poisonpen.com, or give us a call or an email, be happy to hook you up with one. And Joe, thanks again. Have a great rest of your night.
I will. Send my love to Barbara.
I shall. I definitely will. All right.
See you,
Good
Pat.
night.
So long.